Hello, 7th graders, and welcome to Lesson 2-10 on solving one-step inequalities by multiplying or dividing. In tonight's lesson, we have two main objectives. First, you will be able to solve one-step inequalities using division. And secondly, you will be able to solve one-step inequalities using multiplication. So for a warm-up, we have some solve the equations. Now, number one, it says 6 times x, or 6x, is the same as 24. So we need to figure out what number is x standing in for. All right, some of you may know, oh, I know the number that I can multiply by 6 to get 24. And that's great. But again, let's go through those steps to solving one-step equations. So this is where you do the opposite of what they're doing now. So they're multiplying 6 times x. So to get rid of that 6, you divide by it. All right, so I have left x is the same as, well, 24 divided by 6 is 4. So number one is 4. Go ahead and do 2, 3, and 4. And when you're all done, come back and check your warm-up problems. So go ahead and do those now. All right, so hopefully you had a chance to solve all of these. Well, for number 2, you divide by -7, and you get v is -9. For number 3, well, they're dividing by -2, so you times each side by -2. And you get x is, well, 10 times -2 is -20. And number 4, again, they're dividing, so I'm going to times by 6. And I get t is, well, 48 times 6. 6 times 8 is 48. 24 plus 4 is 28. So t is 288. So you're going to use those skills in today's lesson. But first we have a little bit of an exploration. And they want you to figure out, well, fill in the inequality for each problem. So for example, 6 divided by 3 is 2. Well, 12 divided by 3 is 4. Well, 2 is less than 4. And we're going to continue all the way down, basically, as we go through this. We have the number 6, and we're just going down. We start with +3 and go down to -3. And on this side, we have 12, and we go from 3 to -3. So if you go through these, 6 divided by 2 is 3. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Well, 3 is less than 6. 6 divided by 1 is 6. 12 divided by 1 is 12. 6 is less than 12. Then we get to negative numbers. 6 divided by -1 is -6. 12 divided by -1 is -12. Well, this time, -6 is greater than -12. And you keep going, -3, -6. -3 is bigger because it's closer to 0. Then 6 divided by -3. And then 12 divided by -3. You get -2, -4. And that is bigger. So if you take a look, you'll notice that a change happens halfway through. From these positive numbers, we have the less than. All right? Before this, you divide 6 or 12 by a positive number. 12 always seemed to be bigger. But when you divide 6 or 12 by negative numbers, the 6 became bigger because it was closer to 0. So, does the direction of the inequality symbol stay the same as you divide by each side of an inequality? The answer is no. When you divide by a negative number, it actually switches. So we need to keep that in mind with this property that's coming up, this division property of inequality. And it reads, if you divide each side of an inequality by a positive number, you leave the inequality unchanged. So again, it's basically solving equations, except there's an inequality in there. But if you divide each side of an inequality by a negative number, right, that's really important. So if you divide both sides by a negative number, you must reverse the inequality symbol, or the sign. And you'll see what I mean in just a moment. So I have here 30 times x is greater than 270. Well, these are just like our warm-ups. Except instead of an equal sign, they have this greater than sign. But you solve it the same way. I find my variable, and I look at the operation happening now. I have 30 times x. Well, to get rid of 30 times x, the opposite of timesing is dividing. So I divide each side by 30, because if you do it to one side, you have to do it to the other. And I'm left with x is greater than, let's see, those zeros crossed out, 27 divided by 3 is 9. X divided by 9. So go ahead and do B now, or the second one. Negative 21 is less than 3 times m. Again, same steps. You find your variable, which is m, divide by 3 because they're timesing, and you are left with negative 7 is less than m. Or again, if we want our variable first, which we normally do, rewrite it as m. Open side is facing the m. Closed side is towards the negative 7. So m is greater than negative 7. So far, if we go back to this original problem, we have been dividing by positive numbers. Both of these numbers have been positive. So our sign is unchanged. Now in this one, it's going to look a little different. All right, I have 36 is less than negative 9 times t. Well, to solve, I need to divide by negative 9 because they're timing by negative 9. And I get t, and well, 36 divided by negative 9 is negative 4. Now here's where the change comes into play. This time we divided by negative 9. If you divide each side of an inequality by a negative number, you have to change the sign. So instead of having this less than, now we have the greater than symbol there. So we have actually negative 4 is greater than t because the sign had to switch. All right, it was less than, now it's greater than. Of course, we should rewrite this now as t is less than negative 4 to have it correct. There we go. All right, so let's try another one. A 1-ton truck has the ability to haul 1 ton or 2,000 pounds. At most, how many television sets can the truck carry if each TV set weighs 225 pounds? So, I want you to try to figure out this inequality for yourself. Just go ahead and write it down for now. Each TV weighs 225 pounds. We don't know how many exactly fit in the truck yet, so keep that in mind for the variable, and it can help haul at most 2,000 pounds. So, go ahead, pause me, and try to solve this. Go ahead and do that now. All right, let's try to set this one up. Well, we know that we're going to talk about TVs, and I'm going to use the variable T to stand for every single TV set. All right, because we don't know how many we're hauling. But what we do know is each TV weighs 225 pounds. So I'm going to have 225 times T, because each TV times it by 225, and that'll tell you the total weight. Now this has to be less than or equal to 2,000 pounds. And you have to use a 2,000 here because this 225 is in pounds. So you want to keep the units the same. So that's how you should have set it up. And then if you go ahead and solve, well, I have 225 times t is less than or equal to 2,000. To solve this, I need to do the opposite of what they're doing. So they're timesing 225, I'm going to divide it. And I accidentally almost make a 2 there. There we go, 225, and I do that to both sides to keep it even. And I'm left with t is less than or equal to, well, let's see. How many times does 225 go into it? We're going to try 8. 40, 16, 20, 16, 17, 18. All right, so that's not quite enough. So we're going to try 9. 225 times 9. And again, you could divide this out, of course. 45, 18, 22. Oh, that's too much. So basically, it's less than or equal to 8, well, 18. All right, so it's 200. So basically, all it can hold, though, is less than, you can't have a little bit less than that, or you can't have 8 in a fourth or 8 1/2 television sets. They come in wholes. So really, it can only hold less than or equal to 8 TVs. And again, the fraction didn't really matter here because, again, you can't have like a fourth of a TV. All right, now we're going to look at the multiplication property, and this is the same property as you saw in the division. If you multiply each side of an inequality by a positive number, so that number you multiply by is positive, you just rewrite the sign, it doesn't change. But if you multiply each side of an inequality, again, by that negative number, you have to reverse the symbol. So if both sides are multiplied by a negative number, you've changed the sign. So number 1 here, this t divided by negative 3 is less than 7. Well, to get that t alone, I have to times, because they're dividing, by negative 3. So those cross out, I am left with t and negative 21. And if you take a look, I multiply both sides by a negative 3. Because it was a negative number, my sign reversed. So instead of t is less than negative 21, it's now t is greater than. All right, go ahead and do the next two, but I'm going to change this a little bit on you. I'm going to make this last one here, 5 is less than r divided by negative 7. All right, so make sure you make that same change, and go ahead and solve both of those. When you're all done, come back and check it out. So go ahead, pause me now. All right, so on the second one, we have m divided by 4 is greater than or equal to 2. Well, to get m by itself, instead of dividing by 4, I do the opposite in times. So now I have m and 8, and this time I multiplied by just a regular positive 4, so my sign stays the same. M is greater than or equal to 8. All right, and then on the third one, we have 5 is less than r divided by negative 7. Well, we have r divided by negative 7. In order to get rid of that negative 7, I have to do the opposite, so times. And I do that to both sides, and I get negative 35, and I get r. Now this time, I divided both sides by a negative number, so my sign reverses. So it went from less than to greater than. However, again, this is one of those problems where the variable is written last, so you need to reverse it. R, and let's see, the point is towards the R, open mouth is towards the negative 35, is less than negative 35. There we go. So now we have this one, and again, I want you to solve it on your own, and it helps if you talk yourself through it. So you hear me talk through every single problem. I want you to try to do the same. Do the problem, but talk your way through it. All right, so go ahead, pause me, and do the problem. All right, so in this problem, we have z divided by negative 8 is less than or equal to negative 2. Well, my variable here is z, and I need to get it by itself. So instead of dividing by negative 8, I times by it, and I do it to both sides. So those cross out, and I am left with z, and well, negative 2 times negative 8, 2 negatives make a positive 16. And I look back, well, I multiply both sides by a negative number, so my sign would reverse. So I have z is greater than or equal to 16. All right, now here's a quick way to look at it. If you look at the side with the variable and it has that negative number, that automatically means that your sign is going to reverse. So we're at the end of your lesson. And what I want you to do is basically look at all 5 of these, and I want you to just decide, will the sign reverse or not? So you don't actually have to solve them unless you want to, but I want you to decide, will the sign reverse? So for number 1, I look at it and I see, oh, in order to get x by itself, I divide by a 3, because this 3 in here is positive. So I divide both sides by 3, so my sign would stay the same, because you're dividing by a positive number. Number 2, however, I take a look, and I have to decide, would the sign stay the same in the end, or am I dividing or multiplying by a negative number? All right, so go ahead and just decide for these 5, and come back and check your work. So go ahead and do those out. All right, so let's see. Number 2 here, we have negative 5 times w is the same as 15. Well, to get w by itself, I divide by negative 5. The sign would reverse, because both sides would be divided by negative 5. Number 3, I have 1/4 times y is less than or equal to 1/2. Well, to get this one the same, I could write it, again, as y over 4, or solve by doing the reciprocal, which is 1/4. So the sign would stay the same, because either way, I'd be multiplying by 4. All right, number 4 here, I have negative x divided by 5 is less than or equal to 0. Now this one could get tricky, because you think you could just say, oh, I'm going to be timesing by a positive 5, so the sign would stay the same. Except this x at the top is negative. Because the x is negative, all right, you can move that down to the bottom. Because when a number or a fraction is negative, well, that just means one of those numbers is. So here you could actually multiply by a negative 5. So this would reverse. Or again, if you like to multiply by fractions, you could also multiply this one by the reciprocal. Instead of negative 1/5, you do negative 5 over 1. All right. And then number 5, well, we have 4 times f is greater than negative 12. We divide each side by 4. So that's positive, so it'd stay the same. All right, so that's your lesson for tonight. I will see you in class tomorrow. Have a great night.